Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome you to the 10th lecture on the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Before we start with the lecture, I would like to give you an overview of lecture 9. So during our 9th lecture, we had a discussion on how the managers can manage the communication effectively in the organization. We started off with discussing the different functions of communication. Then we discussed the communication process and the communication model. We saw that how communication starts off with the sender, how there is a necessity to have a message before the communication starts, and then how the sender codes that message, how that message is received by the receiver, and then how he decodes that message. And how that message is interpreted, and how, if there is a difference between the coding and decoding of the message, the noise can be created, and what are the other external factors that can create noise during this process. We also saw the importance of feedback in the whole communication process. Then we discussed how the communication can be downward, it can be upward, and how it can be lateral. We discussed the importance of how the managers can effectively make communication downward with the employees, and how this communication can be ineffective if the managers do not let the employees participate in the decision making, or if they do not let the employees explain how they have arrived at certain decisions. And we also discussed during our upward communication topic or the slide, that how the lower level employees or the lower level managers, they can communicate with their bosses more effectively using this upward communication. We discussed different tips and tricks to effective upward communication, and then we had a discussion on why the lateral communication is required in the organization, what are the different benefits and what are the different pitfalls of this lateral communication, and how under what conditions the organizations can discourage this lateral communication. Then we discussed the concept of verbal, written and non-verbal communication. We discussed different modes of verbal communication, what are the different advantages and disadvantages of verbal communication, such as the face-to-face meetings or the speeches given by the manager to the employees, and we discussed that how they ensure fast feedback, and they are more accurate, and they are very speedy, and they are less time consuming. And we discussed but we also discussed that the main disadvantage of verbal communication, which is that they do not carry any record. So after the time has passed, you do not have a sufficient record of what had been communicated. Then we discussed the advantages of written communication, which basically address the disadvantages of verbal communication. That is, everything that has been communicated is in writing, so that is in record. Whenever, after maybe a decade, if you want to get back to that information, you can have a record of that on papers. Then but we saw that the written communication is not as speedy as the verbal communication is, and sometimes it can really cause the information overload in the form of lots of emails that you are receiving, or a lot of other messages in any other form, such as in the form of text messages or in the form of instant messages that you can receive. They can be sometimes very overloading for the workers or for the managers, and they can hamper the smooth functioning of the managers. They can increase their workload. Because sometimes most of the messages that are being received through email and other channels of written communication, they are junk, and you also have to get rid of those junk messages. Then we discussed the non-verbal communication, which is the way you're communicating through your body gestures, or the way you're communicating through your facial expressions, or through your hand language, or through your intimacy, that the level of intimacy that you show with the person to whom you're communicating communicating with. For example, the physical closeness. If you're close, maybe you're trying to be intimate, and if you are keeping a distance, maybe you are trying to show the person to keep in distance, right? And your anger, your resentment, your happiness, everything that has a meaning, and it is coupled with the communication, this verbal or the written communication that you are doing with the other communicator. Along with that, it carries meaning, and that is why we discussed that even in your written communication now, in order to increase the element of emotions, the emoticons have been introduced in many instant messaging services. They have these options that you can make these different smileys, and which can show how you feel about certain thing, how you feel about certain statement. So we also had a discussion of how these formal communication networks are formed, or these small networks are formed in the organizations, and how these different networks they can such as we had a discussion of this all channel, we had the discussion of this wheel, and we had a discussion of how these the different networks that are formed in the organization, they can the level, the speed, the accuracy, the reliability of the information that can vary with respect to these different networks that are there in the organization, and what kind of organizational structure or what kind of organizational objectives can best be met using which channels in the organization. Then we had a discussion on the concept of grapevine, which is that when the employees, they're getting the information about the important aspects in the organization, about the important happenings in the organization, such as the change of the CEO in the organization, or the layoff of the 10% of the employees of the organization and stuff like that. When the employees receive the rumors about this kind of happenings at the top level in the organization, which are not being formally communicated yet to the employees, that is the grapevine. So employees normally enter into grapevine for the things that they are most concerned with, and we had a detailed discussion on this, that when the employees enter into grapevine, and what are can be the different benefits of grapevine, and what can be the different disadvantages of grapevine, and how can managers reduce this rumors from spreading in the organization amongst the employees. Then we discussed the concept of choice of channels and channel richness, that how the managers have a choice as to the communication channel that they have to use to communicate, such as they have to use some written channel or they have to use some oral channel, right? It depends upon the message that you are conveying. We had a discussion that the choice of channel, it depends upon what kind of message you have. If it is a routine-like procedure, then it can be communicated with a channel that is not very rich, and if it is a non-routine message which is unlikely for the employee to hear, or which is a new message for the employee, it is a non-routine procedure, or anything that is non-routine, and the manager wants to communicate to its employees, then it should be communicated through a rich channel. And we discussed that what a rich channel is. Richness of a channel, it depends upon the combination of the different ways of communication that you are using in your channel. If you're using both the verbal and the non-verbal communication forms of communication, then that is a very rich channel. For example, the face-to-face meetings, where you can communicate both verbally and you can communicate non-verbally, right? And so that is a richer channel. And that channel, another indicator of channel richness is that the degree of feedback and the efficiency with which you can receive the feedback on that, so that the feedback ensures that the message has been decoded in a proper way, it has been interpreted rightly by the receiver. So these qualities are not there in the written modes of communication, such as in the emails or in the other written form of in the memos or in the office notifications. They don't have this kind of channel richness, because one, you cannot get immediate feedback, two, you cannot enter into non-verbal communication with your employees right? Because of these elements, those channels are not that rich, right? So when the manager has to communicate the non-routine messages, it is better to have the face-to-face meetings with the employees and then notify them or then inform them about what the company expects or what is non-routine, whatever the non-routine expectation is from your employees, right? Then we had a discussion of how what are the different barriers to the effective organizational communication by the managers. We had a detailed discussion on these different barriers which can be there to and which can reduce the effective communication in the organization. We had a discussion of how the selectivity bias and we had a discussion that how the managers, they can sometimes become very much they are sometimes stereotype, or we have stereotyping in our mind, or we build certain images in our mind that for example, that a lady who is coming to the job for interview, since she's a female, so maybe she cannot sit very much overtime, so that is why her communication is really affected by this presumption of that manager or that interviewer, and the remaining communication does not remain that affected because that is affected by, or that is contaminated by this belief of ours. Then there can be certain gender biases. We had a discussion of how the males and the females, there is difference between their perceptions and how the communication, it can lead to ineffective communication between them because of their varying assumptions and because of their varying expectations and because of their varying perceptions about different things and different ideas and different day-to-day routines, right? And we discussed a number of other effective communication barriers. We also had a discussion on how the cross-culture, how the can be a barrier to effective communication, and we discussed it with a few examples that how the cross-cultural barriers, they can hamper the effective communication, and what are the steps, what are the different actions that you can take to ensure that culture is not a barrier towards the effective communication. How you need to understand the other person by going into the shoes of the other person, and keeping in mind that there are personality differences which are there between cultures. You need to understand that, and instead of passing any or making any subjective judgments about the other person who is belonging to a different culture, you need to give him some time and you need to make a good understanding of the beliefs of the other person and how he acts under certain situations, what he means out of certain things. And so because we saw that how different words have different meanings across different cultures, right? I gave you a number of examples on this cross-cultural dimension of effective communication. That was this was it that we discussed for our last lecture, which was on managing the effective communication in the organization. Now for this lecture we move to the lecture 10, which is on managing motivation of the employees. So we'll be discussing today what is employee motivation, how the different motivation, what are the different motivation theories. So we will start off with the Maslow's need hierarchy theory, then we'll go to the ERG theory of motivation, then I will explain you theory X and theory Y, then we'll move to the two-factor theory which was given by Herzberg, then we'll move to McClelland's theory of needs, then we have the cognitive evaluations theory, we have the goal setting theory, and under this we'll also, as an extension to it, we'll be discussing the management by objectives, which is an application of this goal setting theory. Then we'll move to the self-efficacy theory, and lastly we'll see that how these different, what are the implications of these different theories for the organizational managers. Right, so we'll be discussing the implications of managers vis-a-vis all these different theories individually. So when we come to an end of each theory, we'll be discussing that what implications this theory has for the managers, and then we'll have a overall discussion in the end of these different theories for the different managers. So let's start off with the concept of motivation. What is motivation? Motivation is basically anything that drives, that gives you a direction of your work, where you are persistent in your work and where you work intensely, right? Where there is intensity of your effort, right? So you can be called to be motivated, or you will be motivated only when you will be motivated when you will be putting extra effort in your work, right? When you will have certain direction towards work. You will not be doing your work on ad hoc basis or randomly, or you'll have certain specified goals that you know that you are going to achieve, and you will be really persistent towards your work. You will have some long-term orientation to achieve your targets, to achieve your goals, right? It would not be short-term, because when you're not motivated to do something, if you keep it to yourself and you see that if you have if you set some goal, and if you're really motivated to achieve that goal, only then you will stay persistent in your efforts to achieve that goal. Otherwise, in the short run, maybe you will run off that goal, right? If you're for example seeing that in the short run that your objectives are not being met, or it's difficult to achieve that goal, or there is any external factor, any external noise that is making a difficulty for you to continue in the long run, you will stop doing that task. But if you will be really motivated to do that task, you will be persistent. You will wait in the long run, you will keep your efforts in the long run, and you will wait for your goal to achieve. You will keep putting your efforts, right? So motivation is linked to persistence, right? And then motivation is of course linked to intensity. The people who are motivated to do certain tasks, the people who are motivated to achieve certain goals, they are basically they put in more effort to achieve that task or goal compared to the people who are not motivated to do it, right? Then of course there is a direction. You make certain strategies when you are motivated to achieve something. Then you also think up of different plans, different strategies, that how you have to achieve that thing, right? So motivation also gives you direction. So anyone who is not motivated, or who does not have a motivation, he will lack intensity. He will not put in that much effort. He won't be persistent, and he won't have a clear direction of how he has to reach his desired goals. So here I would also like to make it clear to you that motivation can be towards anything, right? Motivation for games, motivation for play, or motivation for achieving any target of yours which is in your personal life, like you have to reduce your weight by 10 pounds or by 10 kgs by this much time, or in this much duration, right? So motivation can be towards any facet of our life. It can be in our personal life, it can be in our professional life, it can be in our organizational life, right? So here today we are of course going to talk about motivation in organizations, right? How employees' motivation towards their work, towards their job, it can what are the different outcomes that it can give to the organization, and how it is related to organizational performance, and why organization is concerned for employee motivation, or why managers are concerned for employee motivation. We'll be having some insights into managing the employee motivation so that it can give better outcomes to the organization. I would also like to tell you here that we'll cover this in detail in our next lecture most likely, but because we have started off with the topic of motivation, therefore for your prior understanding, and I'm sure most of you might have already studied this, it would be in your knowledge that how motivation is linked to different organizational goals and outcomes, because I thought that it is important to explain to you right here before we are starting off with motivation, that why it is important in the organizations to study motivation. As I told you that we'll be studying this from organizational perspective or from the managerial perspective. So it is important to study this motivation, work motivation of employees, or their job motivation, it is important because it is linked to a number of outcomes. Scientifically, it has been proven that motivation is linked to both individual outcomes, such as organizational commitment, such as the job satisfaction of the individuals, such as the job performance of the individuals is higher, the productivity of the individuals is higher, and it has also been linked to a number of organizational outcomes, such as the motivated employees also tend to perform higher organizational citizenship behaviors. They also tend to exhibit, the organizations, they are reported to be more effective, right? And the organizational performance enhances, the individual productivity enhances, as a result the organizational productivity also enhances, right? And the turnover intentions of the employees are lower who are really motivated to perform their work, right? So there are a number of outcomes that are really important for the organization, which can be achieved through employee motivation. Right, so the motivation, it has been a subject of industrial psychologists, it has been a subject of research for the economists, and the concept of motivation, you will see it in many different fields of research and of study, such as in organizational behavior, in the economics, in industrial psychology, in organizational psychology, and in human resource management. You will see that the topic of motivation, it is one of the central topics, and it has gained a great amount of attention, both from the academicians and from the practitioners. So it is a very hot question at all times for the managers as well, that how to keep the employees motivated, because it has been proven that without motivation you cannot get good performance or better performance from the employees, and without motivation you cannot achieve your desired goals, because the individuals, they are less likely to produce effectively. They are more prone to absenteeism, they are more prone to turnover, they are more prone to looking jobs elsewhere where they can find better motivation and stuff like that. So it is a challenge for the managers to keep their employees motivated. Here we are starting off this concept of motivation with a number of theories, and these theories are basically mechanisms, or they are the guidelines, or they are, each theory is trying to explain that what draws employee motivation, how the employee motivation is determined, and what are the factors behind the employee motivation, and of course then it has the implications for the managers, that basing on that theory, what insights can the managers gain, and how they can they can develop or build a certain strategies basing on these theories, which can enhance the employee motivation. Right, so we discussed that motivation, it is the process that accounts for an individual's intensity, direction, and persistence of effort toward attaining a goal. And so the key elements of this motivation is that it is intensity, that how hard a person tries, and its direction, which is towards a beneficial goal, and persistence, that how long a person tries. I explained all these three different elements to you previously, and here we'll be discussing the hierarchy of needs theory, which is the earliest theory on motivation, which was given by Maslow. I think it was in 1943 that this theory was presented, and it's the oldest theory of motivation, right? So according to this theory, it is one of the most popular theories of motivation, the oldest as well as one of the most popular theories of motivation, because it was the first theory which tried to explain that how the employee motivation can be determined, or how the employee motivation is, what are the factors behind employees motivation. So it's trying to explain all the different factors which lead to employee motivation, or which reduce employee motivation. So the theory basically, I'm sure you must all be already familiar with this theory, but of course as a part of the course I have to follow this all these theories, one, and secondly some of you might not be familiar with the theory earlier. So we'll be discussing this theory and the mechanisms which are underlying in this theory. It basically divides the employee needs into, categorizes them into 5 different levels, levels of needs, and 5 different hierarchies of needs, right? And which are, if we have a graphical presentation of these needs here, we see that at the baseline you will see that the first one is the physiological need. and after that comes this safety need, then we have the social need, then we have the esteem need, and then we have the self need. So the theory basically divides the needs of the employees into these 5 categories, and at the bottom of the category is the physiological need, and at the top is the self-esteem needs, or the self-actualization need, which it calls, right? So if these needs are further subcategorized into lower order needs and higher order needs. So lower order needs are the needs that are satisfied externally, such as the physiological needs and safety needs, and higher order needs are the needs that are satisfied internally, such as the social need, esteem need, and self-actualization needs. So let's see in our next slide what these different needs stand for. So physiological need is basically the need for an individual's need for hunger, an individual's desire for water, for his thirst, that is a need. Then we have the shelter, that is a basic need of the individual. So they have the sex needs, and they have other bodily needs. So they are all the physiological needs. They are the very basic needs of the individuals, that any individual, they are the first needs of the individual, right? Such as the safety needs, such as the hunger need, he wants food, he wants shelter to stay somewhere, and he has other bodily needs in the form of he needs some clothes to wear on, and etc. Then we have the safety needs. Safety needs are the need for security and protection from physical or emotional harm, right? You need to have a protection. Then we have the social needs. They are the affection, belongingness, acceptance, and friendship. They are your social needs, that you need to have a certain degree of affection with someone. You need to have a feeling of belongingness with others. You need to be accepted by others. You need to have that feeling of acceptance from others, and you need to have friendship, right? They are your social needs. Then you have your esteem needs. Esteem needs are the internal factors such as self-respect, autonomy, and achievement, and they are the external factors such as status, recognition, and attention, right? Then we have the self-actualization need. Self-actualization is the drive to become what one is capable of becoming, achieving one's potential, and self-fulfillment. So these are all the different categories of needs that the individual has, and according to this theory, individuals must move up the hierarchy in order. So that is the assumption that that Maslow makes, and this is also the crux of this theory, that the individuals, they move from one order to the other order after the first order has been fulfilled, or after the first level has been fulfilled. Only then they move to the next level. For example, if we go back to the pyramid, we'll see that individuals, they have their unless and until their physiological needs are met, or because they're very basic needs, the need for hunger, for food, the need for water, and the need for shelter, unless those needs are met, the individual will not think of moving to the higher order need. When they are met, then he thinks about his safety needs. When they are met, then he thinks about his social needs, and when they are met, he thinks about the esteem needs, need of recognition and autonomy, etc. And when they are met, only then he feels the need of self-actualization. So an individual cannot be at the top of the pyramid unless and until his basic needs are met. He cannot think of this entering into this self-actualization unless and until his very basic needs are met. So that is basically the crux of this theory. So application of this theory is that a homeless person will not be motivated to meditate. So for self-actualization, of course, you need to do the meditation, what you actually want to do. You're realizing yourself, you're trying to realize your potential, you're trying to realize your objectives for which you can internally grow, right? So of course, if you don't have the food, if you don't have the shelter, you cannot think of meditation. So that is what this Maslow's theory says. Then we have the Alderfer's ERG theory. That is basically an extension of this Maslow's theory. So what he does is that he categorizes all the 5 needs that were categorized by Maslow. Compared to that, Alderfer categorizes the needs into 3 categories, right? So they are basically all these three categories, they can be very much directly related to the 5 categories that have been identified by Maslow. So here E stands for existence, which is similar to the Maslow's physiological and safety needs. Then R stands for relatedness, which is similar to the social and status needs which were given by the Maslow. And then the G stands for the growth needs, which is similar to esteem and self-actualization needs. So he basically is he's saying that individual needs to satisfy all these 3 types of needs, which are existence need, relatedness need, and growth needs, right? But the only difference of ERG theory from the Maslow's theory is that it does not this theory is not built on the assumption, or it does not state that individuals cannot move to the upper level of the hierarchy unless and until his previous level hierarchical needs are met. So it does not categorize the needs on the basis of hierarchy, right? It says that individuals can simultaneously achieve, or they can simultaneously try to achieve all those different levels of needs, right? So an individual can simultaneously be motivated to achieve his growth needs or to satisfy his growth needs, as well as he might be simultaneously motivated to satisfy his existence need. They can go side by side. So this is the major difference of this view from the Maslow's view, which believes in the strict order. Then we have the theory X and theory Y. So theory X and theory Y basically says that managers, they divide the individuals, or they perceive the individuals as theory X employees, or the X category employees, or the Y category employees. So under theory X, both these theories, they have different assumptions. Theory X assumes that the individuals assumes that the managers, they assume individuals or the workers to be lazy and to be disliking their work, and they try to avoid responsibility. So under theory X, the managers, they have this assumption, or they have this belief that the workers, they are inherently irresponsible, they don't like work, and they have little ambitions, or they have little goals of their own to achieve the tasks. And under theory Y, the managers have the opposite belief. So it is the theory Y is the positive belief about the employees, and theory X is the negative belief about the employees. So the managers who follow theory Y, they assume that the employees, they are hardworking, they are self-directed, and they accept responsibility, which is the opposite of what the managers perceived from the workers who are under theory X, right? So both these theories, they have the different implications for the managers. McGregor, who basically extended this theory, he believes that theory Y assumptions, they are more valid, right? Which means that individuals, they're not that bad, they actually like to do work, they have certain ambitions of their own to produce the desired activities, or to reach their outcomes. Therefore managers should create conditions for the employees which are encouraging for them, which encourage the participative decision making in the organizations, and which provide them the opportunity to understand their responsibility, and which give them the challenging jobs, and which can give them good group relations. So managers should create an environment for the employees wherein they can exercise their autonomy, wherein they can be responsible for their own tasks, for their own activities, they can set their objectives, and they have the challenging environment, and they have good relations to work with, right? So as per this theory, as per the beliefs of the McGregor, managers should give the employees this kind of environment where the theory Y factors, they can be promoted. So he basically believes in the theory Y assumptions. As to the empirical support for this theory, there is no evidence which indicates that these assumptions, they are true, or the theory Y assumptions are true, or actually the employees, they really are theory Y employees. And if the managers, they provide this kind of conditions to the employees which can promote this theory Y beliefs, it may not increase the employees' motivation actually, right? So as per the theory Y environment leading to motivated workers, it still remains a hypothesis which needs to be tested. There is no evidence for this, that theory Y employees, they will really, or theory Y environment, if it is provided by the managers, it will really lead to motivated employees. That is still unproven. Okay, we have this another theory which was extended by Herzberg, which is the two-factor theory. This is again, this theory gained very much popularity in the motivation literature, and this theory is also one of the widely used theories in the motivation literature and practiced by the managers. This theory, basically, what is the important contribution of this theory is that this theory stated that job satisfaction is not the opposite of job dissatisfaction, or job dissatisfaction is not the opposite of job satisfaction. The Herzberg basically collected data from a number of people and asked them of different factors which leads to their job satisfaction and the different factors which lead to their job dissatisfaction, and he found out that the factors that were pointed out by the employees for their job satisfaction, they were entirely different from the factors that they identified for their job dissatisfaction. It led Herzberg to conclude that satisfaction and dissatisfaction do not stand on the opposite poles from one another. And it also led him to conclude that the factors for job dissatisfaction are different from the factors for job dissatisfaction. So if you provide certain conditions to the employees which reduce their job dissatisfaction at work, it does not mean that those factors will also lead to job satisfaction of workers, right? So the theory stated that opposite of job dissatisfaction is not job satisfaction but no dissatisfaction, and similarly the theory stated that the opposite of job satisfaction is not job dissatisfaction but it is no job satisfaction, right? Because the factors that are determining the two are entirely different. Therefore, provision of the one factors which promote one kind of condition in the employees does not mean that it would not create another kind of condition. So let's see what these factors are actually. He divided these factors into the hygiene factors, which were the extrinsic factors, and these factors were related to the dissatisfaction of employees. So the absence of these extrinsic factors was related for increased employee job dissatisfaction. So if we see then a few examples of these different factors which he calls the hygiene factors, they are salary, they are the working conditions, and they are other company policies in the organization. So they are basically all the extrinsic factors in the organization which, if provided by the organization, can lead to reduced job dissatisfaction of the employees. And we have the motivators on the other side. So the second factor which Herzberg pointed out was the motivators. They are the provision of the responsibility to the employees, giving them an environment where they feel responsible. They are given the autonomy for the task, they are responsible for the task, and where they can have a sense of achievement for attaining certain tasks or attaining certain goals, and where they have the growth opportunities. So they are the motivators, provide them the conducive environment which can enhance their job satisfaction. So he linked the motivators to the job satisfaction of workers. So here this exhibit, it gives you very in detail all the different factors that Herzberg came up with, all the different items that he came up with which contribute to or which determine the employee's job satisfaction or job dissatisfaction. So you basically see that he on the left hand side there are these hygiene factors which contribute to the employee's job dissatisfaction or absence or presence of job dissatisfaction, right? So these factors are security needs, the status needs of the employees, their relationship with the subordinates, their personal life, their relationships with peers, their salary, their working conditions, their relationship with supervisor, their supervision, which means the quality and quantity of supervision that they receive from the supervisor, then the company policy and administration. So these are all the different factors which are determining the employee's job dissatisfaction. And on the right hand side of this graph, we'll see the factors which are determining the job satisfaction of the employees, right? So these are basically the recognition that the employees receive, the achievement, the responsibility, advancement opportunities, and the growth opportunities which the employees have from the organization. So they are the factors which contribute towards the job satisfaction of the employees. So there are the contrasting views of satisfaction and dissatisfaction as per this theory. I explained all these this concept to you earlier, that how the traditional view is that on a pole satisfaction is one extreme and dissatisfaction is on the other extreme, but according to Herzberg, the satisfaction is on one extreme and no satisfaction on the other extreme, but not dissatisfaction. And the motivators determine this satisfaction and no satisfaction. If you provide the employees the conditions which are conducive for their if you provide them these motivators at work, for example achievement, growth, and responsibility, then it will lead them to their satisfaction. But if those motivators are not there in the organization, then they won't have any satisfaction. But it does not mean that they will be dissatisfied. They will be dissatisfied when these hygiene factors they are missing in the organization, right? So if they're getting all those different hygiene factors that we just studied, if they have been provided by the organization, then there will be no dissatisfaction. But if those hygiene factors are not provided by the organization, then there won't be any dissatisfaction, but they won't also lead to the employee satisfaction. So there is certain criticism on this theory. It has been heavily criticized basically. The first criticism is that all these criticism you would see that most of it is criticized on the methodology that the Herzberg used to collect data from the different categories of employees to measure these hygiene and motivating factors, right, and the job satisfaction of the employees. So first the critics say that most of the time what the employees do or what the individuals do is that they are attributing the failure to the extrinsic factors, right? So if they are failed to do something, then they are directly blaming the extrinsic factors or the external environment which is directly been provided by the organization. But if they succeed in doing something, then they do not attribute that success to the organizational factors, but they attribute that success to their own self, that due to their own personal reasons or their own personal commitment or their own personalities, they have achieved something, but they are not trying to relate that to the organization, contrary to what comes from the Herzberg's theory, that the motivators lead employees to their growth and the existence and to their satisfaction. Then we have this second criticism, which says that ratings used to measure job satisfaction, they may be contaminated because they have been these are all different ratings. They were being done by the people or by the employees, and they might be positive on one scale item, but they may not be positive on another similar scale item, which will lead to which would have led to the contamination of your research or of your study findings. Then the study also says that there is no overall measure of satisfaction that has been utilized. So satisfaction, it might be one facet of so there are different facets of job satisfaction, and employees might be satisfied on one facet of job satisfaction, and they may not be satisfied on one facet of job satisfaction, but their overall job satisfaction might be higher. So overall they are satisfied with their job, but with one certain facet they are not satisfied, right? So for example, it could be that I am not very happy with my relationship with my co-worker. I am not satisfied on that aspect, on that facet, but overall I am satisfied with my job, right? So it does not consider the overall measure of satisfaction. Then another criticism on Herzberg's theory is that it assumes that there is a relationship between satisfaction and productivity. But in the theory and in the reports of the theory, we see that only satisfaction is measured, job satisfaction and job dissatisfaction, right? only that has been measured, and only the factors which can identify these two dimensions of satisfaction, that is satisfaction or dissatisfaction, only they have been reported, and we cannot see any measure of productivity in this theory. But we only can assume the relationship with satisfaction and productivity for the purpose of this theory. We need to assume that relationship, but actually the theory does not measure productivity, or it does not say that there is a nowhere it is shown that there is a strong link between satisfaction and productivity. It has not been empirically tested in the theory, but it can only be assumed that a strong relationship exists between the two. So overall, again, just as we saw for the previous theories, that there is no sufficient backing from research, or there is no empirical evidence which proves or negates these theories. But overall, this theory, and the previous theories, they may sound empirically well, they may sound intuitively very well, but they lack empirical support and empirical evidence, and same goes for this Herbert's two-factor theory. Then we see that David McLean's theory of needs. So he basically categorized the needs of the employees into three categories. One is the need for achievement, which is the drive to excel, to achieve in relation to a set of standards, to strive to succeed, right? How much you want to achieve, how much is your drive to achieve. So some people, they really have high need for achievement, and some have low need for achievement. Then we have the need for affiliation, which is the desire for friendly and close personal relationships. Again, some people are high on the need for affiliation, and some are low on that need. So some people really like to be staying alone and aloof and not very social and not very friendly, and some people are otherwise. Then we have the need for power, which is that the need to make others behave in the way that they would not have behaved otherwise, right? So some people, again, they have higher power needs, they really want to be in authority positions, and some people, they don't have such needs. So individuals have different levels of needs in each of these areas, and those levels will derive their behavior, right? So if you are higher on need for achievement, according to this theory, you will have different outcomes, and if you have different power need, you will have different outcomes. So again, as per this theory, most of the research that has been conducted on the need for achievement and the other two dimensions of this need theory, which is the power need and the affiliation need, they have there is not much evidence on those areas. But for need for achievement, it has been suggested that for the employees, if they have the 50-50 chances for of success or failure, then the need for achievement is the highest, right? And because if the probability is very high that you will succeed, right? If there are 90% chances that you will succeed or you will achieve a certain task, then there is not much challenge in that task, and there is not much need for achievement resultantly. And also the need for achievement is lower when the probability of failure is very high, right? Because then if you achieve something, again, you are not very happy, or you don't have that sense of achievement, because you feel that you attribute your success to mere chances, right? So to have 50-50 chances increases the need for achievement of the achievers. Then it also says that effective managers, they are more linked to they might be more linked to the higher power needs and lower affiliation needs compared to the need for achievement. Because need for achievement, as I showed you previously, that it's more related to the achievements that the sense of achievement that the individual wants to have, or the sense of growth that he wants to have. So it can be more related to the performance of the employees. So the individuals who are high on need for achievement, they are shown to be performing better on their jobs and giving higher productivity. And they may be very good entrepreneurs, but they may not be very effective managers, because for the kind of characteristics which are required to be effective managers is not, of course, need for achievement. Maybe if you have the need for power and if you have lower need of affiliation, they might be more strongly related to the effective managers, right? So here what message it has, or what we can draw or learn from this theory is that individuals high on all these different kinds of needs have different outcomes. So if you have higher need for achievement, you can be a better entrepreneur, but you may not be a good manager. If you have higher need for power, maybe you can be a good effective manager, but you may not be a very good entrepreneur. So here we see that achievers, they prefer jobs that offer personal responsibility, feedback, and moderate risks, right? So we discussed all these aspects earlier. Then we move to the cognitive evaluations theory. This theory basically, it is also again a very interesting theory of the employee behavior, and it has also been regarded as one of the contemporary theory of employee motivation. This theory basically says that when the organization combines intrinsic rewards with the extrinsic rewards, then the employee motivation to achieve something that basically declines. So if I give you an example here of my fondness to read books, I'm really fond of reading books, and because I enjoy reading books, I feel that it's fun reading books, so I'm intrinsically motivated to read books. That is why I read books. But if suddenly I am given a target from my manager that I have to finish these books during this much time, or by the end of this month I have to read this book. If I'm given this target by my manager, then what will happen is that my intrinsic motivation to read that book, that will eliminate, that will diminish, and that will be replaced by the extrinsic motivation to read that book. That is, I have to fulfill a target because I have been given a goal from my manager, and in response to achieving that goal I will receive a certain award. That award can be both monetary and non-monetary. It can be in the form of recognition, or it can be in the form of some bonus that I have been given, right? So now my urge to read that book would be replaced from the intrinsic motivation to extrinsic motivation. So now I will feel that my behavior is more controlled. So that is what this theory basically states. It says that when the extrinsic factors, they come in when an individual is doing a task only because he finds happiness or if finds pleasure in doing that task, and if the organization also links that task with some extrinsic motives or extrinsic incentives, as a result the intrinsic motivation of the individual will go away. That will fade, that will diminish. So prior theories of motivation, they stated that intrinsic factors and extrinsic factors, they are not mutually exclusive, they can go simultaneously. So you can provide the individuals some very conducive working conditions which can enhance his intrinsic motivation, and you can also give him some extrinsic rewards which can increase his extrinsic motivation or motivation to do work. But this theory says that if you give them both to the employee simultaneously, then the intrinsic motivation will go away. So one important conclusion that can be drawn from this theory, or an important assumption of this theory, is that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, they're not mutually exclusive, as I told you earlier. Then what are the implications for managers of this theory? So because normally what the organizations, they try to do is that they try to link their performance appraisals with their rewards with their performance appraisals, right? So the rewards are performance based, the rewards are contingent on performance. So what does it mean? Does it mean that if the managers, they are linking the rewards to performance, then the individuals will be doing that task or that activity because of the extrinsic factors only, and their intrinsic motivation to do those tasks will be gone? And what does it mean for the organization? What should managers do? Should they not link their rewards to performance appraisals or to their performance, right? Because if they link their rewards to performance, their intrinsic motivation is gone. And does this theory imply that Don't give rewards to the employees because their intrinsic motivation will be gone, and let them, if they're intrinsically motivated to do that activity, just provide them a conducive environment and they can keep on doing that activity, and then they can achieve their goal. Extrinsic, this theory basically says that only the tangible rewards, they diminish the intrinsic motivation of employees, and not the intangible rewards. So intangible rewards are in the form of the recognition that the employee gets, right? And the extrinsic rewards, or the tangible rewards, are in the form of the increases in the salary, or in the or promoting the employee, or giving him the increments or bonuses or any monetary rewards. So all the monetary rewards are tangible, and all the non-monetary rewards are intangible, but they both are extrinsic rewards. So the theory basically says that only the tangible rewards, they undermine your intrinsic motivation, and the intangible rewards, they do not undermine intrinsic motivation, but they increase it. So if the employee gets the recognition, which is an intangible reward, for doing a task, it will only enhance his intrinsic motivation to do that task. It will not undermine his intrinsic motivation to do that task. And as I explained to you earlier, that the explanation for these tangible rewards being linked to the undermining of intrinsic motivation of the employees is that now the employees, after they have been given a target, or they have been their performance has been linked to the extrinsic rewards, they feel that now the locus of control has shifted from internal to external. Now they feel that there are certain factors in the external environment, such as their supervisor to whom they have to report to. Now that external control element comes in when you make something contingent on external factors or on external rewards. So this research, or this theory, has been supported by a number of studies. It has gained really increased evidence. Then we have an extension of this cognitive evaluation theory, or CET, which is the self-concordance. Concordance basically says that intrinsically motivated people, they are happy even when they cannot reach their goals, as they find the process fun. So because they really are enjoying doing an activity, they find it intrinsically satisfying and happy to do a certain task. So even if they are not able to achieve the outcome or the final goal, they are enjoying the whole process because they are taking it as fun, or they are enjoying that. They really like doing it. Or extrinsically motivated people, on the other hand, even if they achieve a goal, but they are not that happy even if they achieve a goal, because that activity itself was not fun for them. They were just doing it for an extrinsic incentive, right? So that goal achievement itself does not give them any sense of accomplishment, but because or they do not feel really happy because they do not inherently like doing that task. Right? So there are certain implications that this theory basically has for the managers and for the employees themselves. For the employees or for the individuals, the implications are that they should be very careful in the choice of their jobs, right? So they should basically try to find those jobs, or they should try to choose those occupations or professions where they have some intrinsic motivation to perform, where they have some inherent desire to perform what they like doing, the activities they like doing. They should go into those activities, or should go into those, because it has been also been reported by literature that the intrinsic motivation is more positively linked to the individual and the organizational outcomes compared to extrinsic motivation. So the outcomes that you achieve, the goals that you achieve, they're basically short-term goals, and the individuals who have the extrinsic motivations to perform certain tasks, they continuously need to be given the incentives, some monetary incentives or non-monetary incentives to keep performing. On the other hand, this is not the case with intrinsic motivated individuals. Intrinsic motivated individuals, they perform a task only because of the task itself and not because of any other factors. Therefore, you do not need to give them any kickbacks in the form of those hygiene factors that we discussed earlier. You don't need to give them those kickbacks to keep them performing. So the managers, they, of course, they also need to understand what are the different intrinsic and extrinsic motivational orientations of employees. Some employees can be inherently intrinsically motivated, and some can be inherently extrinsically motivated, right? So the managers, one, they need to understand what are the different motivational orientations of these employees, and how the managers, they can enhance these different motivational orientations, right? So how can managers create an environment which is really conducive towards the intrinsic motivation of the employees, because intrinsic motivation, it basically flourishes under the environment where there is more autonomy to perform, right? And there is more challenge in the job, there is more autonomy for the employees to perform their task, and there is sense of achievement and sense of fulfillment. That these are the factors that really enhance employees' intrinsic motivation, and the intrinsic motivation has the long-term benefits for the organization. So managers should try to understand the differences between these two forms of motivations, how they are differentially linked to the different outcomes, and how they are these two forms, they require different factors, or they have the different determinants, and what combination should the managers use of the extrinsic and intrinsic motivators to achieve good level of performance from the employees. We have a cartoon here. Have a look at this and try to see that in this kind of situation, what would Herzberg say and what would Maslow say. Then we have this goal setting theory, which was given by Edwin Locke. The theory basically is says that specific and difficult goals, if you generate them, and if you also give the self-generated feedback, that would lead to higher employee performance. So the goal is basically linking the theory is basically linking the goals to the performance of the employees, and it says that if you give them a really specific tasks, and there should be enough degree of challenge in the tasks, right, and you're also giving them feedback, then it will lead to their higher performance, right? So by the specific task, we already or the specific goals, we already told you what specific goals are, that there should be a time duration in those goals, and you should have an exact target that you have to achieve 10 million sales in next 6 months, right? So you have the very specific, you have specified your goal, and there should be sufficient amount of challenge in those goals. So for the theory says that for the relationship to exist between the goals and performance, it really depends on goal commitment, and we already discussed goal commitment in one of our slides, that goal commitment is I want to do it and I can do it, right? So according to this theory, this goal commitment can be enhanced through participatory goals, making your goals public, like sharing your goals with others, and being specific, and through the involvement of top management, through top management commitment, goal commitment can enhance. So top management can show its commitment by way of, for example, increasing their support for the employees' goals in the form of giving them funds, for example. And then the other element that the theory gives for the goals to work, and for the relationship between setting goals and performance, is the task characteristics. The tasks, they should be simple instead of being complex. The tasks, they should be well learned. You should have a good command, you should have a good skill for performing that task instead of being novel. And the tasks, they should be independent instead of being interdependent. So when the tasks are interdependent, you need to link them to group goals. For the individual goals, the tasks, they need to be independent, right? So there are certain task characteristics. So these characteristics should be there in your task for this relationship between goals and the performance to occur. And the next factor is the national culture. So this theory is more aligned with the North American cultures than for the Southern or the Asian cultures, because of the number of factors. That is one, the theory, since it says that the goals, they need to be independent, and these North American cultures, they are collectivist cultures where this power distance, need for power distance is not too high, right? So we'll be discussing all these different dimensions of the culture or the national cultures in one of our lectures, when we'll be discussing the organizational or the national cultures. So here we just see that the other element in this theory is that the goals, they need to be challenging, and those North American societies or those cultures, they are low in uncertainty avoidance. That is why it is directly aligning, there is direct alignment between this theory or between goal setting and performance in those cultures. And the third factor that makes this alignment right for those cultures is that they really give weightage to performance. For them, performance is important, so they are high in achievement. They have higher achievement needs, and that is why this theory or these goals, they need to be more linked to the performance in those cultures. Then we have this implication or the application of this goal setting theory in the practitioner world or in the life of the organizations. So management by objective program, we already discussed this program in one of our previous lectures, so I will very briefly explain to you here that according to this management by objectives, the companies, they need to set the goals and objectives, and these goals and objectives, they are basically as this is exercised by the middle level managers in the organization, and it is an attempt to achieve the higher order goals or the goals which are set by the top management of the organization. So this management by objective is basically, it is based on the goal setting theory. So here what you're doing is that you're setting the goals, you're setting specific goals, and you're setting these goals together with the employees. So these goal setting is participatory. Here this is the only difference which exists between this MBO and the goal setting theory, because according to goal setting theory, you need to set specific goals, but those goals can be participatory as well as they can be assigned by the managers. And goal setting theory says that even if you're setting the goals which are set by the managers without the participation of employees, they are equally effective. But as per the management by objectives, you need to set goals which are together with the employees. So goal setting should be participative for better results or for good results. Then of course there is an explicit time period that during this much time you need to achieve your targets and goals, and then there is performance feedback. The meetings between the managers and the employees take place on very regular basis, on quarterly basis and so on, and to judge the performance of the employees and to give them feedback, which is timely feedback. Again, this is how we have the individual objectives, we have the departmental objectives, the divisional objectives and organizational objectives, and this is in line with the management by objective approach, that how the objectives, they have to be in line with each other, and how management by objective approach is basically attained to achieve, to make an alignment between these different goals at the different levels in the organization. So if we see make a comparison between this management by objective and goal setting theory, we'd see that goal specificity is there in both the theories. Both say that goals should be specific. Both say that goals should be, there should be a certain level of difficulty in the goals, there should be challenge in the goals. Both say they have an element of feedback, that there should be feedback on the employee's performance, so that feedback can be generated by the supervisor, or that can be self-generated feedback as well, because sometimes self-generated feedback has also reported to have better results over the feedback that is given by the externals or the external raters. Then the participation, as I explained to you earlier, that MBO believes that goals should be set through employee participation, and goal setting theory believes that they can both be participative and they can be assigned by the managers. Then next we see that why MBO fails, because there are certain unrealistic expectations about the management by objective results, and there is lack of commitment by the top management. I explained to you in a few of my lectures that why top management commitment is important, and it has failure to allocate rewards properly, right? Because it's really difficult to have the meetings, those very regular meetings with your employees at the lower level, and then provide them the appropriate feedback. And due to a number of factors that are prevalent in the organization, it's often the rewards are not contingent on performance, right? And then the cultural incompatibilities are there as well. We discussed that how your culture needs to be supportive to achieve these management by objectives, the goals set by this. But overall, that organizations that adopt them this management by objective approach, 97 or 95% of the organizations, they are reported to be performing better than the organizations who do not use this approach. Then we have this self-efficacy, that is the next theory of motivation, which says that an individual's feeling that he or she can complete a task, that is, I know I can. So your self-confidence on how well you can perform a certain task. So the more efficacious you have, higher probability you have that you will be achieving your goals. And of course, self-efficacy, it should not be confused with the self-esteem, which is an entirely different concept, which is the individual's degree of liking or disliking themselves. So self-efficacy and goal setting, they are basically they are going together, they go hand in hand, they are not conflicting with each other. Self-efficacy is basically built on the goal setting. It says that managers, they set goals for the employees, and the more challenging the goals managers set for employees, the more self-efficacious they feel compared to their co-workers, for whom, if for example the goals are not set by managers which are very high, so the individual, he may feel that his manager has more confidence in him that he can achieve more challenging goals compared to his co-workers. That is why he has assigned him more difficult goals. So the individual's self-efficacy increases as a result of the goal which has been set by the manager, and the individual has higher level of job performance as a result of higher level of self-efficacy. So there are four different concepts which Bandura, who was the theorist behind this self-efficacy theory, it was given by her, and she says that there are four factors that can enhance the employee's self-efficacy. First one is the inactive mastery. Inactive mastery is, if you have done a task in the past, your self-efficacy will be enhanced. So if you have done something already in the past and your manager gives you a goal that you have to do this now, of course you will be very much self-confident that you will be able to do that task, because you know that you have already done it. So mastery orientation is the first determinant that can enhance the self-efficacy of employees. Then the vicarious modeling, which is that someone similar to you is doing a task, and that increases your confidence as well, that if someone else is doing it, you can also do it. And if that someone else is really similar to you, then it even enhances your self-confidence, or your ability, or your self-confidence to do that task, right? So if someone is losing weight, you also feel confident that you can lose weight. But if someone is playing golf very successfully, then you also have a confidence that he will play. You can also play golf successfully. But if you have some physical handicap or some mental handicap, and someone else who is playing golf and also has a physical or mental handicap and is playing golf successfully, it would even increase your confidence that you can also do it. Then we have the verbal persuasion, which is another element that can enhance self-efficacy. It is that when someone is convincing you that you have the necessary skills to do something. So if your manager, for example, if he is trying to convince you that you can do it, you have the skills to do it, it will enhance your self-confidence that you can do it, right? And motivational speakers, they often also use this tactic, right? They're trying to motivate you by telling you that you have all the skills to do it, you can do it. Then the arousal is the energized state to do a task, and Bandura believes that the more sense of arousal that you have, the more degree of arousal that you have, the better self-confidence that you have that you can do that task. So as I told you earlier, that the self-efficacy is working together with goal setting theory, and self-efficacy individuals, they're more likely to work harder in response to negative feedback and vice versa. So the individuals who have confidence on themselves, on their abilities, they are expected to perform better when they receive negative feedback. They even increase their effort because they do not lose hope. They have confident that they can do it. And on the other hand, the individuals that are low on self-efficacy, when they receive negative feedback, they are really discouraged because they feel that they just cannot do it, right? And they may quit doing that task or activity. So with this, we come to an end of today's lecture, where we discussed a few traditional or old theories of motivation, and we also had a discussion on a few contemporary theories of motivation. For our next lecture, I would like to continue with these contemporary theories of motivation, and then I would also give you some more understanding about how the different organizational policies and practices, they can be used by the managers to enhance employee motivations, or how they are linked to employee motivation, the different managerial practices. So with this I conclude today's lecture, and I thank you very much for your active listening and for your patient hearing. I hope you have developed a good understanding of the motivational concepts that I explained to you here, and you enjoyed listening to me. Thank you very much, all of you. Allah Hafiz.